Success isn't just about what you achieve. It's about living a life that reflects your values and priorities. Welcome to Engineer Your Success, the podcast that helps you lead with intention and live fulfilled.
Have you ever reached a point in your career where you're doing everything that you've been told to do financially, but you're still not sure that you're thinking right about money, particularly in the season that you're in? If you're a long term listener to the Engineer Your Success podcast, you already know that success looks different depending on the season of life that you're in. But the same is true for your financial life because it's really no different. Joining us today is Dr. Adam Link. He's the founder of Fireweed Capital. Adam brings a rare combination of experience, engineering leadership in Silicon Valley, multiple company exits, and a deep background in finance to help technical professionals think more clearly about money, risk, and long-term decisions. I'm Dr. James Bryant, the host of the Engineer Your Success podcast. And Adam, I am glad that you are here.
Likewise, thank you for having me. Excited to chat today.
Okay, I want to dive right in. And so my first question is, how did your perspective on money evolve as you have moved from finance into engineering leadership and then into the work that you're doing now?
Ooh, that's a good question. Yeah, so I think really when I started out in engineering, like most folks out of college, it's basically a question of, do I have enough money to even, afford a lunch today, right? And, you fast forward now, I've been in the workforce for, gosh, almost 2 decades. It's getting up there. And my perspective on money has certainly really changed. As I kind of, increased my salary, there was a period where I was almost doubling my salary every few years as I job hopped early in my engineering career. And with each subsequent raise came the ability to save more money and the ability to have some lifestyle creep as well. You no longer had to worry about affording lunch. Now it became like, well, what type of lunch do I want? Do I want to get do I want to get a dessert with dinner when I eat out? And so really my perspective on money shifted from kind of the scarcity mindset to more of an abundance mindset and realizing, what can I do with the money that I'm saving? And now in engineering leadership, it's like, well, I max out all my retirement accounts. I max out contributions. And now it becomes a question of what do I really want to do with the excess that I have? And it becomes a question of what is important to me as an individual? What are my goals? And how can my wealth best support that? And that's really the approach that I've taken now in wealth management for a lot of folks in engineering.
Can you give a little bit about your engineering leadership background? Because all engineers may not have the exact same salary and career trajectory that you just talked about.
Yes, yes. So I am privileged enough to work for a Silicon Valley tech company. Coastal tech salaries have been high and increased a lot since I'd say about 2010. So where I am in engineering leadership, as a senior engineering manager, I basically sit right below a director. And so for those of you who want to know, so my day job, I work at Coinbase. You can go onto levels.fyi and see what coastal tech salaries are. They are heavily stock compensated, but there is a six-figure base salary, and with that level of income comes a lot of freedom and the ability to really think about, like I said, what's important to you as a human. For me, in engineering leadership, what's important to me, frankly, is career growth and the wealth management side, matching people's goals and their money together to really unlock the life that they want to live. And a lot of that, I will say, comes with an abundance mindset. And what I mean by an abundance mindset, this is something that I think is really what an engineer gets once they have enough, that they're not feeling that they're living paycheck to paycheck. But an abundance mindset basically says, look, I've got a great job today. There are more great jobs out there if anything were to happen. I've got a good income. There are more good incomes out there, right? I've got enough money to go around. And that is really something that I think all engineers should really strive for in their career. At some point, you want to hit that level because it really helps, especially in your career as well, that you can sit there and say, not only do I have enough, but there's enough time in the day to do what I want. There's enough sprints in the month to get done what I want, right? There's enough tickets in my backlog that I can do what I want, right? It's a great place to be.
What did engineering leadership teach you about money that finance alone may not have taught you?
In engineering leadership, a lot of what you do is unblock your team and allocate resources. In finance, you learn, and I will say, so I've got a bachelor's degree in finance, right? So I've got academic training in finance, and then I switched over to computer science for my master's and my doctorate. So in classical academic finance, you learn about resource allocation and basically, what can I do with each additional dollar to maximize my stated goal, whether it's income or savings or whatever it is, a wealth accumulation. Engineering leadership has really taught me the principles of resource allocation when it comes to the human emotions behind what you're doing. And so there are some engineering managers out there that would say, okay, what I do is I allocate resources. And that's true. That's business speak for I tell people what to do with their day, right? And a more introspective leader would say, I strongly suggest what it is that people should do, because you have to recognize there's a couple things at play of human autonomy, human decision, and the fact that you are not allocating resources, you're telling people what to do with their day, with their time. So when I look at the wealth management side of what I've learned, as a financial advisor now, I do the same thing, right? It's resource allocation. What am I really doing? I'm strongly suggesting how you as an engineer use your money that you have earned. And in much the same way that you can decide to not follow what I suggest as an engineering leader, you can also decide to not follow what I suggest as a financial advisor. And anyone who's managed engineers knows that sometimes an engineer will go off the beaten path and find a solution that is way better than what you had spec'd out in the product requirements. And those are awesome things to find as an engineering manager, because you get to see the hidden talents of your engineers really show up. As a wealth manager, somewhat similarly, you may go off the beaten path and find something that works better for you. And then what we do is we say, okay, given that change, how do we update your financial plan? How do we update the way that we think about your money? And then how does that help you better understand what you want out of life?
This is Dr. James Bryant, the coach in your corner. If you're an engineering leader who wants to win at work and at home without burning out in the process, keep listening. Every week, I help my private clients bring order back to their leadership, their schedules, and their lives, not because they're doing anything wrong, but because they've outgrown their old definition of success and they have no idea what to do next. Together, we define what winning actually looks like for this season of their life. We help them build the clarity and confidence and systems that they need to make it real so they can lead with purpose while staying present for the people who matter most. If this is you, then it's time to take the next step. Visit engineeryoursuccessnow.com to schedule your complimentary integrated success strategy call. Let me help you win at work and at home. If you think about your career and how things have progressed, right? What made you or what helped you make that shift to start thinking about wealth management in engineering leaders? What was the thing that said, you know what? I want to help other people do this?
Yeah, so much of what I did for fun in engineering was still financial based. And I found myself as the engineer, especially as an engineering manager, once I moved up to management, fielding questions from my team on things like, what should I be doing with my retirement account? What should I be thinking about for allocating to my 401k, and thinking about buying a house? What should I be thinking about for buying a house? And in the United States, you are allowed to give generic financial advice without being licensed. But the minute you start doing specific financial advice for people for pay, you're supposed to be licensed. And I basically say, look, I don't like kind of skirting the line and living in a gray area. And the more I realized I was talking to people about their finances, the more I thought, I should get licensed in this. So I did. I became a licensed financial advisor, and now I can get paid for telling people stuff about their finances. And really what it also does too for me, I went through a whole bunch of training. I got my CFP. I wanted to make sure when I was giving financial advice to people that I wasn't saying the wrong thing. And, with a doctorate as well, I learned best through formal education. And so I did what I've always done to learn, which is I went, I took a course and I got a degree and now I got a CFP and now I know a little bit more about what I'm saying to people, right? Making sure that I'm steering them down the right path.
What are some of the typical challenges that people come to you or questions that they have?
Yeah. A lot of what I end up talking with engineers about is now that I've done everything I've been told, what else is there? And a lot of times what engineers have done is they've just, maxed out their retirement accounts. And that is kind of the first step of this abundance mindset. Once you realize that, I've got enough money to max out a retirement account, now what? I've worked towards that goal for so long. And so where I usually end up talking to people is, okay, well, now that we maxed out a retirement account, what other options do we have? Can we do a mega backdoor, right? So we can actually save a lot more money into our retirement accounts. Can we look at, kids' education? Let's start thinking beyond you. What do you want for your family? What do you want for your kids? Are there ways to set up that next generation? And a lot of times where I find engineers are getting tripped up is they've followed the generic advice out there for every normal person. But as an engineer, especially as you start earning over six figures, you have just excess wealth. And so it becomes a question of, are we maximizing the right thing? And oftentimes, engineers optimize for low fees in their investments without taking into account the fact that they are structurally setting up their portfolio incorrectly. And that's usually where I'm able to help, right? Is okay, we've optimized for the wrong thing. We did a great job optimizing, but it's the wrong thing. How else can we structure your wealth so it actually accomplishes the goals that you want?
And so, what should we be optimizing for?
Well, not low fees. And that's going to sound like the weirdest thing ever for most engineers, right? So I've invested in a whole multitude of investments and investment styles, right? So angel investing to venture capital to real estate to private equity. And we have a hedge fund offering at Fireweed Capital as well that is not a low fee offering and it's not intended to be a low fee offering, right? So what you really want to look for is fees are secondary to what you're trying to get done with your money. Similarly, people talk all the time about how do I reduce my taxes? And reducing taxes is good, but you don't let the tax tail wag the income dog, right? And what we mean by that is, look, you're going to pay taxes when you make. So pay as few taxes as you can, sure, but optimize to pay low taxes at the expense of making the money in the first place. Similar with fees, right? You can optimize for low fees, but if you've given up actual return that allows you to grow your wealth to the point where you can do what you want with your money, you've optimized for the wrong thing. And so if you have to pay a little bit more in fees to get the returns that you need to do what you want with your wealth, great. The fees are irrelevant. What you want to do with your wealth is what matters. And so that's kind of the perspective that I take, which is there's a cost for everything. And at a certain point, whether or not it gets you towards your goal is what matters.
Leadership comes with high expectations, too many responsibilities, too little time, and the constant pressure to keep up. If you're feeling stretched thin, you're not alone. At Engineer Your Success, we help leaders take back control so that they can lead with confidence, delegate effectively, and stop running on empty. You don't have to choose between success and sanity. Let's build a leadership plan that works for you. Visit engineeryoursuccessnow.com today because thriving isn't just for others, it's for you.
Yeah. So I can almost hear other engineers or people that are listening to this podcast, and they're going to say, yeah, Adam, of course you're going to say that the fees aren't what you're optimizing for because people are paying fees to use your services. But what I also hear you say is that regardless of fees or taxes or all of these other things that we may think about when it comes to optimization, is that optimization really needs to be moving you towards where you want to go. And it sounds like many people don't necessarily have an ideal of where they want to go. They're just following the routine advice, max out your 401k, do the maybe a 529 or whatever the normal advice is without any real thought as to what the end game or the end result's going to be.
Exactly. And let me give you some hypothetical mathematical examples here, right? As to like kind of why the fee stuff doesn't matter. So if you were to invest in a Vanguard fund, Vanguard's known for incredibly low fees, and you were to take a broad market fund, you could get 7 to 10%. Historically, the market returns 7 to 10%, right? That is great. And you can do that with incredibly low fees, 0.03%. Now, when you look at the hedge fund world, hedge funds offer a alternative investment. It's not correlated to the market usually, and they're operating on a different benchmark. So let's say you can get 15% returns per year in a hedge fund, and the hedge fund is going to cost you 3% per year in fees. That is like 100 times more than Vanguard, right? That's insane. That's an insane fee. Who would ever pay 3%? Because 15% minus 3% is 12%. And 12% is bigger than 7 to 10%.
Yeah.
Right? Now, of course,
Yeah.
we're talking averages. And yes, any engineer listening to this is going to go out and go find the one example that doesn't work like that, right? But in general, right, like that's the idea behind paying higher fees for a potential higher reward. Because even after you pay the fees, you still get a potential higher reward. And so that's what we look at when we say the fees don't. The other thing where we say the fees don't necessarily matter is on the downside. People hate losing money. That's why people don't like paying taxes, right? That's why people don't like paying fees for investments. That's why people don't like paying processing fees for credit cards. You hate losing money. And you said it exactly right, where if you don't know where you're going to optimize for losing the least amount of money on the way there. But what ends up happening when you start looking at the money that you lose is there's a behavioral part of finance that says, I hate losing more than I like winning. And this is very true. People remember losing $1 much more than gaining $1. There's academic studies behind this. And so if you don't know where you're going to optimize to lose the lowest amount possible. But once you know where you're going, the cost of getting there becomes less important than getting to where you want to be. So where people optimize for low fees, it really ends up biting them when the market goes down. Because if you don't know where you're going, you don't have the fortitude to sit through a market drawdown. And that will happen. When you have $1 million in your portfolio, and for some of your listeners, that's a small amount. For some of your listeners, that's a huge amount. But we'll use $1 million and say when you're down 20%, you're down $200,000. There will come a day, some Thursday, some Friday, you'll wake up and you will see a negative $200,000 red number underneath your portfolio. And that is scary. And if you decide that that is too scary, you want out of the market, I'm going to go to cash, the market's down, I'm just going to get out of this thing and wait and see what happens. When you click sell and you lock in $200,000 in losses, I can almost guarantee you, no matter what I charge in fees, it will never be $200,000 over the lifetime of our relationship together. And so what you've done is you've locked in a loss that could have paid for probably 20 years of an advisor holding your hand and making sure that you don't do that, making sure you get to where you want to go. Right? And so again, like the fees don't matter if you're the type of person who's going to leave when the going gets rough. And most listeners are going to say, well, that's not me, that's not me. Well, guess what? It is. Human psychology is working against you. A long amount of human psychology working against you. And really, that's where when we say you're optimizing for the wrong thing, there you go. There's like at least 3 examples of why engineers are doing the wrong thing, even though you're thinking you're doing everything right.
Yeah. No, I think that kind of hits home and makes sense because there are always going to be these questions. And I think this is true in life, that if you're optimizing for the wrong thing, then the result is not going to be the result that you really want. And so a lot of it comes back to getting clarity on what you want to achieve. What do you want life to look like? I know for myself and the clients that we have, we use the Engineer's Blueprint for Success, kind of a 4-step process. And the first part of that is really focus on what matters most. So if we were to apply that to the context of financial planning and wealth planning, then it's focus. What is it that's really important to you in this season of life? What is it that you want to do? And the second step that we take is visualize what success looks like. So what is it going to look like when you actually are there? You know, you have that retirement account, you have the wealth built up, or whatever it is that you've deemed to be important that you're focused on. The next step is to then design a plan to actually get you there. So it's not enough to know where you are and what you want to do, but then you have to design a plan, and nothing happens without that last step. which is execution. You have to continuously execute, see what the results or returns are, and then continuously adjust.
You're right. I think one of the things that I listen to a lot of engineers talking about what their goals are. And for a lot of engineers, the goal is a monetary value. I want to be a millionaire. I want to have enough money to retire. I want to do what's called FIRE, financial independence, retire early. Most engineers are chasing some sort of that. And I will tell you, that is a very good goal to have. A numeric goal is a very good goal to have. When you think about what we talk about in engineering, setting objectives and key results. Every good OKR has a number, has a present state and a future state. That's an excellent OKR. Psychologically, that is a horrible goal. Because when you hit $1 million in your investment account, the question becomes, now what? Yep, exactly.
Now what?
Is my new goal 2 million? Is my new goal retirement? Is my new goal, what is it? And with a numeric goal, when you go and you look on folks who have $5 to $10 million, you will see people that say, well, what's my goal? And almost always it's spend more time with your kids, go build a family, right? And wealth is a means to an end. When you don't have wealth, wealth is the end. And I get that because you're living in a scarcity mindset. But once you even have a little bit of wealth, you realize that wealth is just a means to the end of crafting the life that you want.
No, I absolutely agree. You don't, and I would even position, you don't have to wait till you have 5 million or 10 million or whatever that number is to start designing and living that life that gives you some of those elements of what you want. Of course, if you want to travel 360 days, out of the year, you got to have the money to be able, to do that. But spending more time with family, making sure that you're present when you are with your family, pursuing those things that are meaningful to you, those things don't have to wait until you quote unquote retire or until you hit that number. You can start building and working on those things right now.
Let me tell you a story about kind of when I first felt rich as an engineer. So I started engineering. My base salary was $40,000 a year, which again is not a lot. And I ended up moving and I got a raise to about $80,000 a year. And I remember signing that paperwork and I thought, oh my gosh, I am so rich, 80 grand a year. And I went out with my, at that time, girlfriend, now wife. And we went to the nicest restaurant in town. We live in a small town. And not only did we get an entree for each of us, but I remember sitting looking at a third entree and thinking, I want to try that. And I ordered a third entree. It was like $20. It was ravioli. I wanted to try their ravioli. And I have never felt richer, right? Because we had two of us and 3 entrees, and then we got dessert, right? And we're talking, $50 extra for food here, right? But that's what rich felt like, going from 40 to 80,000. And so, rich doesn't have to be, I bought a new private jet, right? Rich can simply be, the two of us went out and we bought 4 entrees, right? We just indulged in that dinner. And that is a reasonable goal to have, and if that's what you're working towards, you can have those baby steps of feeling wealthy along the way. And it's a great feeling. It's quite a reward to have.
No, I think that's a great story. So Adam, if folks are listening in and they want to follow up and get in contact with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah. So you can go to my website, fireweedcapital.com. We've got a contact us form. You can also email me directly, adam@fireweedcapital.com. I love talking to people and I love helping engineers, shift into that abundance mindset at whatever level that may be. And I'm always open to talk tech and engineering career progress with folks as well. I love helping people in their engineering careers and get promoted and everything too.
Okay, well, we'll include that information in the show notes. And so as we come to a close, one of the things that I like to do is to flip the mic around so that you become the interviewer and I become the interviewee. So what's one question that you have for me?
That's a good question. If you had to look back on your life, what is the best piece of money advice that you got that ended up working out well for you?
Honestly, it may sound really simple, but it's the whole concept. It's not how much you make, but how much you keep. Meaning that it doesn't matter if I'm making 80,000, 100,000, 200,000, 300,000. If I'm spending it all, and I'm living off of it all, then it's not necessarily going to benefit me in the long.
That is incredibly true. That is incredibly true. I've seen engineers who are making $250,000 a year who lose their job and then lose their home. And I've seen engineers who are making $60,000 a year who are on track to retire as millionaires.
Yes. Yes. So that would be especially early on, because early on, the example and story that you gave about yourself and your then girlfriend and now wife is that you splurged, but that was a one-time thing. It wasn't a shift in lifestyle. The problem becomes when you shift, that shift becomes a lifestyle and you're going out 2-3 nights a week. You're getting, a couple of entrees. We don't have to cook anymore. We're going to do all of this other stuff. And again, it goes back to what we talked about before. If you don't know what you're optimizing for, then you'll end up wherever you are. And if you want to end up where you want to go, define that, and now you can optimize for it.
Exactly. Yep. That's great advice, whether it is your career or it's your portfolio, right? That's exactly what it is. You got to know where you're going to end up.
Adam, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. It was a pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure being here. Certainly hope folks get a lot of good advice and good lessons out of this.
This is Dr. James Bryant, the coach in your corner. One of the things that we talked about extensively in this conversation is what are you optimizing for? So when you think about whether it's retirement, the role that you have in work, your career, your home life, what are you optimizing for? What is it that you want to do? We talk extensively about optimizing for winning at work and at home, not an either or mindset, but a both and. How can you take the concepts that we've covered today and apply those to helping you win at work and at home?